Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields is 64 yards away from breaking Lamar Jackson's single-season rushing record that he just set in 2019. Is he going to be able to do that in the Bears' last game of the season? Plus, we got Braxton Jones' comments on his rough outing in the last game. And then on top of that, Velus Jones says he wants to be the player that the Bears drafted him to be. And where are the Bears currently slated and in their draft scenarios? We'll get into all that and more on today's Chicago Bears Central.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
All right, Bears fans. So we haven't had much excitement this season. Outside of some flashes from some players and some games from some players, it's been largely a disappointing season for most Bears fans, considering we only have 3 wins and we have a franchise record 9 losses in a row, with one last game against the Minnesota Vikings coming up this Sunday, which the game time was just set for at 12 p.m. Central Time. So with that being said, is this. Looking at what's coming up for the Chicago Bears in this final game and everything that could be on the line in that game, one of the biggest things and the questions surrounding that game is, will Justin Fields break Lamar Jackson's single-season rushing record by a quarterback? He's only 64 yards away from doing so. And, you have some Bears fans also in the mindset of, hey, sit everybody. What are we fighting for? And we'll get to talking about that mindset and why a lot of Bears fans have that. But here's what I'll say. In a season in which Justin Fields has absolutely been the heart, soul, and the driving factor behind the Bears offense and almost any success that they've had there, even with contribution from Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney at some points in time, the rushing game, which was been the number one rushing game in the NFL, it's really just been Justin Fields being the most exciting player on the offensive end. And he's close to breaking a record for quarterbacks, and that is 1,206 yards rushing by a quarterback done by Lamar Jackson back in 2019. He had a 132-yard performance in the last game this past Sunday. He needs only 64 yards to break that record. Now, considering who Justin Fields is, how he's run so far, he could do that in one play. But how much should that record be at the forefront? Here's what I'll say. Assuming Justin Fields plays, I think the record's all but his. As many records as he's broken this season, why not do one more? Give us something. Give us something. And Justin Fields has the same mindset. He says, I'm already deep into this year, so I might as well go and get that record. That's what it boils down to. He's going to get the record, and it's going to give us at least one last positive note to end the season on as we prepare for free agency and the NFL draft. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think Justin Fields is going to break this record? Do you think he should be fighting hard to break the record? Or do you think if it shapes up to be a little bit too difficult, should the Bears just go ahead and sit him, not risk any injury, things like that? Let him get the damn record. That's my point. That's where I kind of sit at it right now. Now, one of the biggest sore points in last game was Braxton Jones, the rookie. He had a terrible game. It was, let's be clear here, not to sugarcoat. It's not much that you can be salvageable in that game. He had one of the worst games of his career. And he had this to say: I was just kind of reflecting on the game. I didn't do so well. Just have to play 4 quarters, not 1 quarter. Just thinking about where I went wrong, where I can execute better pad level, better pass protection, just all that stuff. I'm not going to sit here and think about it too long, but I'm just reflecting a little bit on it. We had a blowout loss, and the sacks definitely played a part in that. Justin Fields sacked 55 times so far this season. Hopefully he doesn't get to 60, but you never know with this offensive line, and considering they're playing the Minnesota Vikings. But with that being said, Braxton Jones had a terrible, terrible game. Terrible. And while Braxton Jones has had a lot of flashes of showing that he is going to be a starter for the Chicago Bears, or should be a starter for the Chicago Bears team, you have to sit in the failures as well, right? I always say this, and I have this saying, growth comes through failure sometimes. And him having that type of game, hopefully watching the tape on it, running back, knowing what he can do in the technique sense of that to improve. I like Braxton Jones. I like Braxton Jones a lot. I do think the Bears got a really good player at that pick and bringing him in. I do think with improvements overall in the offensive line, better supportive veterans as well around him, if the Bears decide to go the veteran route of improving that offensive line, it's going to help him tremendously. But this game was terrible. And it's good to know that he is aware of how bad that game is. The worst thing that you can do by any stretch of the imagination is to have a terrible game and convince yourself it wasn't as bad as what it really was in reality. And it's good that Braxton Jones is not doing that. Now, hopefully this coaching staff is supporting him, as I said, with watching tape, going through things that he can do much better, working on technique things. I think we got a heck of a player in Braxton Jones. I like Braxton Jones. I know not all Bulls fans are sold on him. And going into this offseason, I do think the Bears have to look at upgrading every single position that they can and that they don't have a surefire starter in. I do think Braxton Jones is still going to wind up being a starter when all that's said and done. But if they do improve the offensive line to a degree to where Braxton Jones is not, I really just don't see the world in which that happens. But anything is possible, especially when you have a leading $120 million in cap space coming up in this free agency and some decent draft picks with some decent offensive linemen also available in the draft. We'll see what the Bears do. That's one of the biggest things that's, cause for excitement and concern is what Ryan Poles is or isn't going to do in this upcoming draft. But we'll see. And speaking of the draft, the Bears can pick as low as 4th right now. We have a couple of different scenarios in which that would happen. They can get as high as the number 1 pick. And that one's pretty much straightforward and clear. If the Bears lose and the Texans win this Sunday, the Bears get the number 1 overall pick. Now, the Texans are playing the Colts. The Bears are playing the Vikings. We'll see. The Bears have not looked good. Neither have really the Texans. But if the Texans do get a win and the Bears lose, the Bears get the number 1 overall pick. The Bears get the number 2 pick. Another straightforward thing. If the Bears lose and the Texans lose, the Bears have the number 2 overall pick. Pretty straightforward there. Now, things get interesting when you look at the permutations that could get the Bears outside of that top 2. Now, the Bears could get the number 3 pick. If they win against the Vikings, the Texans lose against the Colts, and the Broncos would have to win versus the Chargers, and the Cardinals would either have to lose at the 49ers or the Broncos lose at the Chargers and the Cardinals win. Again, pretty convoluted thing there. I don't think that scenario is too likely, but it's Sunday. It's football. Anything can happen any given Sunday, so we do have to pay some respect to that. Could be one of the outcomes. Now, the Bears could drop as low as number 4 if the Bears win, the Texans lose, and the Broncos win, and Cardinals win. So if those 2 things happen, the Bears can drop down as low as pick number 4. Now, some could say that even with that, what does that change for the Chicago Bears? I do think if the Bears get the number 1 overall pick, they are going to trade down with one of the teams, and I don't think they're going to drop too low. I still think Jalen Carter or Will Anderson needs to be a pick that the Chicago Bears make, so they need to make sure that they still pick within the range to get one of those players. Now, you do have quarterbacks in this draft that teams are going to want to build their franchise around. So if the Bears do get the number 1 overall pick, the possibilities are really endless on what they could do. I just hope that they still walk away with one of those generational talents on that defensive front line that we sorely need. Now, if the Bears do pick number 2 overall, I've been on the mindset you hold on to that number 2 pick. And I'm kind of in the same mindset if it's the 3rd or 4th pick. I think the Bears just sit there. Unless for some reason Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are both off the board by the time the Bears pick, if they do drop to number 4, which isn't a likely scenario, but if that scenario were to come to pass and both those guys are off, then the Bears may look to trade the number 4 overall pick, move down some, get a couple of more draft picks. They may, but again, because if Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are both picked with the number 2 and number 3 picks before the Bears pick at number 4, that means there's still going to be 1 and 2 of those quarterbacks on the board that teams win, which still leaves a lot of possibilities for the Bears to trade down with. Now, as we prepare, and I've told you guys, we're going to be upping our offseason, our free agent acquisition. All those conversations are going to be upped on the Daily Show. I said next week, it may be as early as this week because honestly, there's just not a lot to talk about with this Bears team going into the Vikings. Of course, we'll do the matchups, do our predictions, things like that. But at the end of the day, at this point, I think every Chicago Bears fan, for the most part, are looking forward towards what the Bears are going to do in free agency and then in the draft afterwards. I think the Bears are going to be very active in the first wave of free agency where they kind of set out that first wave last season. And I think that they are going to get their guys early on leading into the draft, fill some positions, and then finish their free agency after the draft, after they see what they have. Free agency opens, I believe, March 14th or 15th free agency opens, and then the draft is at the end of April. So that's a lot of time between when this season ends, this week for us, unfortunately, until the free agency and then until the draft even more, for us to really dig down and get deep in that coverage. If you guys are followers over at Chicago Bull Central, you guys kind of know my mindset behind the way I cover drafts and prospects. I'm going to go into detail. You guys are going to get videos. The daily content is not going to stop here at Chicago Bears Central, but those are kind of the scenarios as the Bears look to where they're going to draft in the upcoming draft. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about before we go is Velus Jones. And so with Velus Jones, he's been, I think everybody has understood how disappointing his season is. And I don't mean by understand to say we're throwing a mini bell. No, I mean to understand that we all collectively know Velius has been a big fat zero for the Bears for the most part this season. Had a big game receiving wise a couple of games ago, has had some really big returns, but not really made the impact that we wanted or thought. And I don't even think the front office thought when they drafted him with a 3rd round pick. Now, he had this to say. What really held me back in the beginning was my hamstring injury. It was carrying on into the season and stuff. I feel like that was what held me back. Do I know the playbook better now? For sure I do. But I feel like it was more of my hamstring that held me back more than anything. Now, as much as we talk about Ryan Poles and how he did get some good talent in this draft, Velus Jones presents a unique set of disappointing circumstances for Bears fans because, A, a lot of Bears fans wanted the Bears to go wide receiver with their first 2 picks. That they end up getting Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon at. They do shape up and seem to be players that are going to be on this team and big parts of our secondary for years and years to come. Don't get me wrong there. But a lot of Bears fans hoped and thought that the Bears were going to go wide receiver because that was a glaring need for the Chicago Bears, as most fans thought Ryan Poles' first goal was going to be to get Justin Fields weapons. Now, Pickens ended up shaping out to be a hell of a player. He could have been a Chicago Bear, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. We ended up drafting in the 3rd round Velus Jones Jr., and this is a player that a lot of us kind of thought when you looked at his speed, yes, the age was a thing, but thought that, hey, especially playing out on that slot, I had went on record to say that I thought Velus Jones was going to be the number 2 wide receiver by when it was all said and done. Wearing egg on my face for that. But it's uniquely disappointing how his season has went because he's at a position of need for the Chicago Bears. He has great speed, but he can't hold on to the ball. Now, I know some Bears fans are of the mindset of it's all over, give up on Velus Jones. I'm not in that. I do think with another offseason, hopefully him not having any injuries going into that, we can see what we really have in Velus, even if it is just ended up being on special teams. But his speed is still something that can be a weapon in this Bears offense. And if this Bears team doesn't look to make a big acquisition at the wide receiver position in D-Hub and T. Higgins and some of the speculation there, Velus is going to have an opportunity to still be a part of the passing game and the special teams, and hopefully he stands up and proves in that time that he can still be that player that Ryan Poles saw so much potential in. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. That's it for today's daily episode of Chicago Bears Central. Make sure you follow the show at Bears Central, at Shy Bears Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearsCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail for our Friday mailbag episodes, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bears related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, bear down. Love you guys. And peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.